Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Players Championship Data Dive Show. Per usual, for a Monday night, we're going to take our first look at the weather forecast for the Ponte Vedra Beach area and TPC Sawgrass. We're going to take a deep statistical dive into the data surrounding TPC Sawgrass and previous Players Championships. We're going to finish the show off showing you some research that I posted earlier today to social media. We have a lot to cover, everything for Players Championship this week. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out fantasynational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram are where, as I alluded to, I posted some research earlier today regarding previous winners of the Players Championships, or the Players Championship, some patterns that they all shared, and the 8 players in the field this week who also fit those patterns. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contests I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So that'll be out Wednesday evening. I definitely fired off a few wagers on players at numbers that I liked earlier today. So if you want to see the players that I'm wagering, the players I'm using most often in my lineups, go give me a follow over at X. That comes out every Wednesday, as I mentioned. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle's in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. Really is a great way to start your week of preparation. His article is free to subscribe to, so you really are missing out. If you aren't subscribed to his article, make sure you're doing that and go show him some support. Follow him over on social media. Lastly, we're live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. Have you made any wagers for the Players Championship? Were there any players that you were surprised with their odds? Do you think Scotty is the overwhelming favorite? Are you keyed in on somebody else? What do you think of TBC Sawgrass in general? Feel free to put your opinions into chat. Would love to answer any questions you have as well. And if you aren't able to catch the show live, put your thoughts and opinions in the comments. I'll always get to those as well. So let's get into it. Let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2025 Players Championship. And we start, as we customarily do, with the extended forecast for the tournament, and this week, Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. Good evening, Derek. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Honestly, earlier today, I worked on my camera. I had it working, and now it seems to want to not work. There we go. Hey. So I think I've got that fixed. We'll see. If it pauses or freezes, apologies, I'll turn it off again, but I think I've got it working. Fingers crossed. How are you this evening? Let's win this thing. Need all the help I can get. Fleetwood's the only person I'm taking to win outright at 30. I don't hate it. I know you were talking a lot about him last night. We dug in a little to Tommy's stats. Of course, we'll take a much deeper statistical dive tonight. He wasn't one that I put in, but I can honestly understand the thought process behind it. But I actually put in players a little bit above his price. I think 40. And then above. I didn't put any of the favorites in as of yet. Well, it's good to see you this evening. Thanks for jumping in chat. Very, very much appreciated. The forecast for Ponte Vedra Beach and TPC Sawgrass at the moment. Thursday looks fine. Maybe some gusts picking up in the afternoon, but pleasant. Highs in the low to mid 70s. Friday much the same, although it does look like Friday afternoon into the later portions. Looks like some high amount of wind could be creeping into some players around, so we'll want to keep an eye on that. And of course, we'll update the forecast first thing on the show Wednesday to see if a potential wave advantage develops. And then Saturday and Sunday look pretty rough, at least in terms of wind. Now, the temperature does pick up, reaching into the mid-80s on Sunday, but so does the wind. We do have some substantial rain in the forecast Monday, so if that gets moved up into Sunday, we'll want to be wary of that as well. But as of right now, it's still a little too far in advance to be thinking wave advantage. If you wanted to go with this, you would probably want to give the advantage to the Thursday PM, Friday AM so far. I'm not going to factor any of that in until the forecast really solidifies and we take a look Wednesday night. So there's a look at the forecast, or the extended forecast for Ponte Vedra Beach. Supposedly they did get some rain today, which could soften up the course a little bit as well. With that, we'll move to Fantasy National. The players in the field this week, there's been one more field change as of today, and that is that Bud Cauley is now back in the field. You can see he is unstarred. He is back in the field because Lee Hodges has withdrawn. So Lee Hodges is no longer playing the players this week. Bud Cauley is now in since he was the first alternate. Unfortunately, they do have his stats in. So earlier today, Carl Phillips, he was in here, but his stats were kind of zeroed out. And I noticed my camera is lagging. I'm hoping it cooperates here. But his stats are now in here. So good to know. Okay, let's do a couple of quick reviews from last night, high-level overviews. TBC Sawgrass, well known as a Pete Dye design. So, your top performers in the past 2 years on Pete Dye designs have been Scotty, Xander, Brian Harmon, Justin Thomas, Hideki, Wyndham Clark, Patrick Cantlay, Sung Jae, Carson Young, and Ludwig Aubert. And, of course, the camera decides to freeze, so I will remove that for the time being. There's your top 10 in terms of performance at Pete Dye Designs the past couple of years. Again, I'm just not confident that this is going to play difficult or easy until that forecast solidifies. So we're not going to do anything with that. You could argue to look at 72 to 7400 length courses, considering this is right at 7350. I don't like using that filter either. So instead, that's really going to be the only high-level overview that we do is the Pete Dye filter. So instead, let's just go to Microsoft Excel and really dig into the data surrounding the Players' Championship. I'm hoping that the camera will cooperate. It's starting to freeze, of course. Oh, whoops, wrong button. My apologies. Okay, so let's dig into some of the data surrounding the Players' Championship. And again, I only go back 5 years. We're only going back 4 for TBC Sawgrass since 2020's was canceled. We see that off the tee has been pretty consistent. It did rise quite a bit last year, but that is an outlier. So if we remove that, you see much more consistent here. Surprisingly, does add a lot, 24%. More important than the average full field course. And it's just even more exaggerated if you include the high outlier. Approach, also a big deal around TPC Sawgrass against the full field course average on the PGA Tour. So we're looking at quite a bit of ball striking. No surprise with the approach, considering this is a Pete Dye design. You look at places like the RBC Heritage, you see how much your irons matter there. The Travelers, a little bit more putting oriented there, but again, a lot of approach there. It's just a big factor at Pete Dye Designs. So definitely going to be looking at approach. I am shocked that off the tee does matter. But if we look, it's not really a lot in the distance. We have one low, one high outlier. Even though in 2021 the fairways were actually a negative factor, the fairways here, these numbers are pretty large. Against the average full field course, fairways is quite a bit less. But again, we have an extremely low outlier here. If we remove that, it's much closer to average. In fact, it jumps. So 13% above, you include that extremely low outlier, it jumps to 16% under. So fairways, I do think are going to matter a decent bit. What really matters are greens and good drives. 2% doesn't feel like much. But again, a good drive defined as the players hitting the fairway or they hit the green in regulation. And then greens gained, a big deal. So a lot more on the accuracy here. A lot more on the accuracy as opposed to the distance. Putting, not really a big factor. Not a huge factor at least. So we'll take a look at some Poa Trivialis putting, but we're not going to emphasize it by any means. Around the green, 3% more important than the average full field course, but I do think it actually does play a decent bit, because these greens are not easy to hit, is the reasoning behind that. Players are going to miss these greens. So I do think we want to factor in some around the green this week and into the night. So we'll probably take a look at all four of these metrics in some way or another tonight. Whether they make it into the mixed condition model remains to be seen. But I do want to look at all four of these. Again, we talked about distance versus fairways and greens, mostly in the greens in regulation gained. Maybe some good drives. You can see it is gained in importance over the 4 years. Moving to scoring. Again, the more consistent metric is usually bogey avoidance, with the higher raw numbers and the spikeabilities and the birdies gained. I would actually, the more consistent metric's been in the birdies gained, surprisingly. And moving over against, comparing against other full field courses, like I know that's a huge number for eagles. I mean, eagles do happen here, but it's really on one of the par fives and maybe the par four if they play it as drivable. We're going to be looking at birdies or better, I think. I mean, these are some decently sized numbers in eagles gained, but I don't know if we want to look at it by itself. Birdies slightly less, bogeys quite a bit less. So being able to get birdies, because I mean the winning scores here do tend to get into the upper teens, 17, 18 under. Now what filter we want to use, that's certainly up for debate. Whether we want to look at birdies gained on Pete Dye courses, where you look at birdies gained perhaps on Florida courses, up for interpretation. But I do think we're going to be mostly looking at birdies gained. Going into par threes, fours, and fives, see the threes pretty evenly split here among the par threes. In fact, the 17th is the par three that matters the most among the others. So on the scorecard, there is one that falls to this range, two here, and one here. But you see, they play at varying lengths. So if anything, we're going to focus on all of par threes, all of them. But they don't add a whole lot, just 1% more important. So any par 3s we look at is in totality. Par 4s, interesting. These 3 links, all about equal. So really, you could make the argument to go like 5% in each of these, since they each play roughly the same in terms of importance. I don't hate that idea. And then the par 5s, 2 in this range, 1 in this range, and 1 in this range. Looks like mostly the 500 to 550. But what you don't want to ignore here is that the par 5s are pretty important. 32% more important. So definitely don't want to ignore those. Sorry, I'm going to add this column here very quickly. So we'll take a look at par 5s. Probably all par 5s. Whoops. Wrong tab. Considering they're most of the time in the 500 550, but you don't want to ignore this because they're semi-reasonably close. And then lastly, proximity. This proximity is an extremely low outlier. So if you remove that, total prox does become something. But a lot of it comes in this 100 to 125 and the 200 plus. Remove that low outlier there. 200 plus is really consistent. And the 100 to 125, you got a pretty big outlier here. If we remove that, yeah, it gets negative. That's the issue with individual links of proximity. If you get an outlier in terms of data, it can really throw off the calculations. But the 200 plus is really consistent. Really consistent here at TPC Sawgrass. So quite interesting. Maybe total procs. Might look at some 200 plus procs, which you wouldn't think, but the data is showing that it can matter. There's a look at the deep statistical numbers behind TPC Sawgrass the past 4 years. Again, normally I go 5, but 2020 was canceled. So we'll go back to Fantasy National and start working our way through these different page views here. We're going to start with off the tee, and I'm going to use the Pete Dye filter for off the tee. We did this for the fairways last night, just as a quick look. It's where I'm leaning right now because, again, this course is 73 and some change, so it's not a long course. It's definitely not a short course. I'm not confident at the moment that it's going to be easy or difficult. Generally speaking, it plays to about average. It can get really difficult if the wind picks up. We saw that for Saturday and especially Sunday, but we didn't really see that for Thursday or Friday. So I don't know how difficult this is really going to be. So on Pete Dye Designs, your top off the tee players in the field this week: Scotty, Victor Hovland, Hideki, Brian Harmon, Adam Schenk, Austin Eckroat, Sung Jae, Ludwig Ober, Aaron Rai, and Kevin Yu are your top 10 in terms of off the tee on Pete Dye Designs. Let's remove that filter, and we're definitely going to look at iron play, particularly in-form iron play. So your top iron players in the field this week since the start of this new calendar year, 2025. JJ Spawn, Justin Thomas, Doug Gim, Nick Taylor, Sepp Straka, Colin Morikawa, Nikolai Højgaard, Scotty Scheffler, Jackson Suber, and Mav McNeely are your top 10 iron players. A little bit of foreshadowing here for the research that I posted to social media and that we'll cover at the end of the show. I'm just going to go straight to the around the green. Who's been in form around the green this year? Top around the green players: Hideki, Malnati, Brian Campbell, Minwoo Lee, Michael Kim, Seabez, Andrew Novak, Russell Henley, Mac Meisner, Jacob Bridgman, and Patton Kizzire. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at Poa Trivialis putting. We're going to look at Harbor Town, Innisbrook, Memorial Park. We want Quail Hollow, Stadium Course, TPC San Antonio, TPC Sawgrass, TPC Scottsdale. These are the courses that have Poa Trivialis Overseed listed on the GCSAA tournament fact sheet as the putting surface. So your top putters on Poa Trivialis Overseed: Sam Ryder, Thomas Dietrich, Jason Day, Denny McCarthy, Matt Kuchar, Seabez, Matt McNeely, Chad Ramey, Ben Griffin, Wyndham Clark. So a couple players here that have overlapped. Seabez, short game and putting. No real surprise there. I believe Matt McNeely was there for around the green as well. And now putting. Yeah. So there you go. Xander was up there for off the tee on Pete Dye Designs, I think. And then now in putting. Nick Taylor has a bit of overlap. Good memory there, Derek. Good evening, Darnell. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully you had a successful API in Puerto Rico and are ready for the first, at least by DraftKings standards. I don't know how Yahoo prices their contests, but really this is the first big week for DraftKings in terms of golf DFS. So it's good to see you this evening. We'll try to find the right plays this week for the players. Did but only played 50 cents. Okay, yeah. Just a lighter week. Nothing wrong with that. If I would have just played the Puerto Rico, it would have been a fantastic week. Granted, those aren't, very high reward contests. But my Puerto Rico was extremely solid. I cashed more than 50% of my lineups. I had one lineup that finished in the top 15 in a big contest. So, Puerto Rico was really good. And the API made sure I was just mildly successful this week. The API was not good for me. There's a look at our top strokes gained, various metrics here. Back to your point, Derek, on Nick Taylor. Like, he's been in great form lately with the irons. Not really known as an off-the-tee type player, but you can see every single tournament so far in 2025, he's gained at least one in irons, and that was just the Century. Next lowest is pretty much a 2. So he's been in fuego with the irons, to be fair to Nick Taylor. And if the wind picks up, that's generally when he's at his best too. So we'll move to fairways, greens. Again, I don't believe in the distance thing here at TPC Sawgrass. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back to that Pete Dye filter. If I make 25 lineups, have 20 of them with Fleetwood, is that a bad idea? No, that's what you need to do. Of course, we'll take a look at ownerships and stuff starting Wednesday. But I mean, if you have a very strong conviction on the player, that's what you have to find your conviction, plant your flag on some guys. And I don't know what's going on with Fantasy National, so we're gonna reload this. You gotta, if he ends up being popular, then you're gonna have to find ways to be unique. But there's nothing inherently wrong with, planting your flag on one guy, especially if you have a strong conviction on him. As Darnell said, I mean, if he is popular, that means you'll have to do some extra work on finding some uniqueness. But if that's where you want to plant your flag, that's where you're planting your flag. The most important opinion is yours. I can't tell you how many times I've played some players just on gut feelings. If you have a strong conviction about a player on a week, like I kind of had a strong conviction about Denny McCarthy last week, and he wasn't getting a lot of attention, and he ended up playing, I would say, fairly well. That's what it takes. Now, it was a little bit easier for McCarthy because he was so unique, but, stick to your gut. You'll just have to look at yourself in the mirror if you were wrong, but you just have to be comfortable with that. 30% of people last week had Carl Phillips in Puerto Rico, and he won. Chalk does win sometimes. You have to have the right combination. You have to find the right combination. I found the right combination down in Puerto Rico. I played Russell Henley. I played Corey Connors at the API. I didn't play them together. I didn't play them in the same lineup. And that's why my lineups, weren't all that good. Plus, Obear kind of fell apart on Saturday, but that's neither here nor there. All right. Coming back to some statistical dive here around the players this week at the Players Championship. We'll take a look let's take a look at good drives. We looked at fairways last night. Hey, good evening, Justin. Thanks for jumping to chat. Much appreciated. I like Hideki and Lowry to start my lineups. I like Lowry this week. I'm much like Fleetwood. I bet he's going to be pretty chalky. Hideki's quite interesting. Hideki has had a very mixed bag in terms of success here, and just so we're clear, like I wanted to use the DraftKings pricing. I suppose we could actually, because earlier today it had a lot of players like zeroed out, like they had just been entered. So yeah, why don't we go ahead and do that? We'll go use the DraftKings pricing page. Hideki at 9,900. I don't hate it. Two different tournaments. This one is more volatile. This one is quite volatile with all the water danger in there around Sawgrass. You're all right with that, Darnell. But yes, Justin, thanks for jumping to chat. It's good to see you this evening. It's very much appreciated. I don't hate it, at least as a start. I really like Lowry. He's been getting better here. The one thing with Hideki, even though these are Poa Trivialis overseas, this is base Bermuda, and he generally struggles on Bermuda. And his players, he's been Jekyll and Hyde. He's been all or nothing. 2 top 10s, miscut. Of course, in 2020, the year that it was canceled, he raced out to that blistering start. So he's had a lot of success here, but he's also laid some eggs. With Lowry being so popular, I think you're going to need Hideki to be at least a semi-unique up in this range here. I'll just highlight maybe Obear down to Berger. And maybe Henley. Henley will probably be popular. So, like in this range here, you would probably need Hideki to at least be semi-unique to make it work, unless you have just some outlandish unique play lower in the price board. But I do like Lowry. I mean, no denying the fact that Lowry's been really good lately. What's Hideki's form been lately? He's been, I know his off the tee has been struggling, much like Fantasy National seems to be struggling at the moment. Come on, load. There we go. Yeah, he had lost 4 straight off the tee before gaining 1 at the API. Irons have been hit and miss this year. Of course, the win at the Century. You never count on Hideki putting. I don't know. It's not my first thought, Justin. Wasn't my first thought. But if you're asking me him or Sungjae, because Sungjae's been crazy inconsistent lately. But there's just others in this area that I like. Is how I'd phrase it. Like, Hideki wouldn't be the first name that comes to mind in the upper 9s or low 10s. Agree, Darnell, this tournament is volatile. Just very high on Fleetwood. What are your thoughts on Doug Gim? Man, Team No Putt. That's what I can say. Like, he's doing Doug Gim things. Gaining 8, gaining 5, gaining 2.5 with the irons. I mean, losing 10, losing 4. I mean, he's doing Doug Gim things. He does have a top 20 and a top 10 here, so that's not horrible. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. Not somebody I really thought about, Derek, but I can see it with all the irons. I could see it. Don't hate it. Feel free to keep the questions coming, but we have a lot to cover, so I'm gonna try to get back into that. We're gonna look at good drives gained here on Pete Dye Designs. In the past couple of years, your top good drives gained players. Good drive gain being defined as the player hits the fairway or hits the green from the rough, green in regulation from the rough. Your top players in good drives gained on Pete Dye Designs: Aaron Rai, Brian Harmon, Scotty, Colin Morikawa, Tom Kim, Austin Eckroat, Sepp Straka, Bryce Garnett, Victor Hovland, Sung Jae, and Russell Henley. Hey, good evening, Phil. Thanks for jumping to chat. Much appreciated. Good to see you this evening. I realized this as I was editing my video from last night. I need to give you some credit because I don't think you were in chat when I was talking about it last night during the show. You were pretty high on Tony Finau last week. And again, I just want to give you proper credit because I was nowhere near Tony Finau and he ended up playing pretty well. So, small kudos there to you. Lowry would seem to good fit tee to green. Looking for great tee to green players. That is correct, Darnell. That is generally where I'm at as well with this. There's your top good drives gained players on Pete Dye Designs. Top greens gained players on Pete Dye Designs. Much the same list: Scheffler, Harmon, Straka, Tom Kim, Rye, Lowry, Connors, Morikawa, Victor Hovland, Grayson Sigg, Tony Finau. Okay, go to scoring. And we're going to look at birdies or better gained. And we'll look at some opportunities as well. But really, I'm kind of just defaulting to this Pete Dye metric until we get a solid idea whether we think the course is going to be really difficult this week. Or if we just kind of look at it in the 2025 year. So your top opportunities gained players on Pete Dye Designs: Tom Hoge, who has played really well at TPC Sawgrass, makes a lot of sense. Scotty Scheffler, 2-time champion. Justin Thomas, Players Champion. Shane Lowry's been good here. Obear, Smalley, Tom Kim, Tony Finau, Keegan, and Sungjae. Your top birdies or better gained players on Pete Dye Designs: Scotty, Xander, Patrick Cantlay, Tom Hoge, Carson Young, Siwoo Kim, Rory, Brian Harmon, Justin Thomas, and Sungjae. Top 10 in birdies or better gained. We'll go to proximity very quickly. This, I am going to remove the Pete Dye filter. Your top proximity players, like total procs, so far this 2025 year: Jackson Suber, Sepp Straka, Keegan, J.J. Spong, Chris Ventura, Joel Damon, Ludwig Obear, Charlie Hoffman, Eric Van Rooyen, Denny McCarthy, and Kevin Roy. Top 200 plus procs players: Batia, EVR, Obear, Ventura, Damon, McCarthy, Grazerman, Scott, Adam Scott, Mark Hubbard, and Jackson Suber. I'm high on Siwoo this week and Harmon. I like Siwoo just because he can just thread the needle with his driver. I do think Harmon's going to be a little bit popular, but I mean, he did finish runner-up here last year. But I do like Siwoo. What are their prices? Siwoo and Harmon. There's Siwoo, 82. Siwoo had a pretty bad API. I mean, he was great around the green, but like his irons were pretty good before the API. So maybe he just had a bad week. But I do like Siwoo. Couple of top tens. Of course, won the Players, early on in his career. So he's been pretty darn good here. And then you said Harmon, 76. Harmon with the runner-up last year. This does feel like it would fit Brian Harmon. Good irons. Generally a good putter, but I do worry about this. He's not been very good putting lately. Something's off with the putter. And then his Players resume, good. Runner-up. Another top 5. But he's got some clunkers in here too. Surprisingly, he's actually been really good off the tee here at TBC Sawgrass. So that's something to note. Okay. I can see it. I think I'm higher on, at least early on this week, Phil. Before I've made my mixed condition model and went to the real nitty gritty. I feel like I'm higher on Siwoo than I am Brian Harmon of those two. I think. We'll move into par 3s, 4s, and 5s because I definitely want to do or show you all the research that led to what I posted over on social media. So your top par 3 performers, total par 3s. And again, we went through Microsoft Excel, looked at the detailed data regarding TBC Sawgrass. In fact, 17 is the par 3 that gives the most strokes gained for players historically that have finished in the top 30. But I don't think we want to ignore them all because all of these ranges, literally every one of these ranges, has par 3s here at Sawgrass. One on this range in the scorecard, 2 here, 1 here. But they do shorten this one to play into this length. They do shorten some of these to play here, lengthen one to play into here. So we're just going to look at all par 3s. Your top par 3 performers in general so far in 2025, Brian Campbell, Lucas Glover, who's been really bad around TBC Sawgrass, so keep that in mind. Colin Morikawa, Russell Henley, Ludwig Aubert, Hideki, Chan Kim, Akshay Bhatia, Ryo Itsatsune, and Max McGreevy. Moving right along into par 4s, I am going to expand this to 2024 because not every course has a lot in these various ranges. Remember, we're looking at these 3 ranges here almost exclusively. So, somebody like Scotty, second, first, second. Xander, 26th, 12th, 3rd. Colin Morikawa, 1st, 7th, 14th, very good. Russell Henley, Shane Lowry, basically top 20 in all of those lengths. Probably an honorable mention to Justin Thomas, nearly top 30 in all of them. And really, that's about it. These players seem like they struggle or maybe are just mediocre in one of these lengths. Like, look at Sung Jae, 74th on the short ones. A little better further away. Much the same for Seabez. Seabez really struggles in the 350 to 4s, but plays 400 to 450s well, 450 to 500s well. So, you're wanting to focus on these 3 lengths of par 4s. So again, Scotty, Morikawa, Russell Henley to a little bit lesser of an extent, Shane Lowry. Yeah. And then par 5s, mainly focused on the 500 to 550, but these 2 ranges are where it's at. So again, Scotty, be mindful of Minwoo Lee, like first in 550 to 600, but really struggles on the shorter par 5s. So someone like Hayden Springer, 21st and 9th. Wow, there really isn't a whole lot. Like Keith Mitchell, maybe 25th and 13th. Yeah, there's not a whole lot here. They generally are really good in one and maybe just okay in another, or just kind of okay in both. All right. With that, we're going to move back to Microsoft Excel. We'll bring up the early look file. This is performance at TPC Sawgrass the past 4 years and what they've been doing well. So we'll sort on these various metrics that we know is going to be important. We're going to start with approach. Your top approach players at TPC Sawgrass, specifically just at TPC Sawgrass. You see Ludwig. He's only played it 1 time, but it was really good. Siwoo. So good stuff there, Phil. Somebody, again, I'm really high on. Siwoo's hit his irons immaculately around TPC Sawgrass. I mentioned Tom Hoagie. Tom Hoagie has been exceptional around TPC Sawgrass. 4 for 4 the past 4 years. Not missed a cut. Shane Lowry has not missed a cut in the past 4 years. Justin Thomas hit his irons very well. Hovland doing Victor Hovland things. Ball striking it well. Average putter. Atrocious around the green. Having said that, I'm not really high on Hovland considering we don't know where his game's at. Same with Max Homa. Seabez, somebody else I'm really keeping an eye on this week. He's putt well here. He's hit his irons very well here. Hubbard, no surprise to see Scotty up here. Zalatoris and Rye. Damon. There's Doug Gim. I believe it was you, Derek, that mentioned Doug Gim. He's hit his irons great here. Rory's been quite inconsistent. He has really struggled on these greens. Keegan, much the same. Spieth, at least in the past 4 years, has been quite inconsistent. So there's a look at your top iron players at TPC Sawgrass the past 4 years. Let's take a look at putters. Who's just putt these greens really well. Taylor Montgomery, no real surprise, although I think he's an alternate. Pat Gazire, Jake Knapp, Chad Ramey. Ramey is really good on Poa Trivialis. The rest of his game might be a disaster, but he is putt well on Poa Trivialis. Minwoo Lee, again, horrendous irons, but he is putt well here and he's driven it well. Matty Schmidt, it's just 1 time. Okay, Brian Harmon, been very good on these greens. Sam Ryder, the #1 putter on Poa Trivialis, backing that up there. McCarthy hasn't missed a cut in any of the 4 previous Players' Championships. Seabez. Berger has played really well. Again, this was before his injury, but he played really well here. And particularly putt well here. Dietrich. Rogers, much less in terms of performance, but he's putt well. Adam Scott. Adam Scott. Xander. Corey Connors. I mean, sure, Ricky is putt well here, but he hasn't done much else well. McNeely. Hadwin. Hadwin's been pretty good here. Okay. Take a look at good drives. Players leading the field in good drives gained. Rye, Zalatoris, Mark Hubbard, Victor, Sepp Straka, Sungjae, Harmon. Minwoo's only twice. Hideki, Rose, only 1 for 3. Joel Damon, Shane Lowry again. Connors, Hadwin. Shank's been really good with the irons, but not a lot to show for it in terms of success. There's Doug Gim, JT, Jason Day. Glover and Fitzpatrick, a little bit leaving a little bit to be desired in terms of performance, but they've been at least hitting greens or hitting fairways. Okay. I'm going to skip bogeys or birdies and bogeys. Let's just take a look at par 3s, par 5s, because I really do want to get into the research. Find players who have actually played it more than once. Hideki again. Aaron Rice. So I'll tell you what, Justin, you might be onto something. Hideki's leading the way or really high in a lot of these that we're looking at. So good shout there. Aaron Rye, Hadwin, Fowler, Connors, Ben Griffin only 1 for 2, Nate Lashley, Shane Lowry again, Tom Hoagie, a little bit further on down here, not bad, Kazire, Berger, Scotty, all right. Last one, par 5s, because I do want to get into the research. Par 5s. Top par 5 performers. Holy smokes, look at Matty Schmid. 14.1 in his 1 year. Yikes. He might have had a few eagles there. Tom Hoagie. Siwoo. Brian Harmon. Siwoo and Brian Harmon. You're right on with those, at least in terms of par 5s there, Phil. Hideki again. Berger. Scotty. Sungjae has been really good, at least on par 5s here. Shane Lowry, Justin Thomas, Doug Gim. So I tell you what, chat tonight's had a lot of bangers in terms of shout outs for some of these metrics that we've been focused on. Well done. There's Connors, Fitz, Hadwin, Xander's Outsource. All right, I'll sort this back on best average finish. Seen Kitayama's name a good amount too. Yeah. I tell you what, since we have a little bit of time, I'll bring us back to Fantasy National just very, very quickly. We can take a look at Kitayama. This also gives me a chance to pull up, and I'll pull it up off to the side here. That way I want to give proper credit to the commenter. So I'll have that up here. Kitayama. Been really good off the tee. And to be fair to him with his irons lately. Okay. He's not in the best of form. Top 20 last year. Missed the cut the year prior. I imagine if it gets real windy, he can struggle. Yeah, I don't know. Not my favorite. Granted, I'm not, in tune yet with where people are and in what areas of the price board. We talked about how Lucas Glover has struggled here. I'm really high on Seabez. He's popped a lot tonight. Rye makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, $400 more, which is, in a vacuum, it's not that much. Maybe it's hard to build lineups when we get to it Wednesday night, but like Nick Taylor at 73 makes a whole lot more sense than Kitayama. Trying to look a little bit lower. No one really stands out. Maybe JJ Spawn because he's been playing well. But like Max Homa, he's a disaster right now. I don't have a lot of confidence in Ricky. Harry Hall might be interesting at 6,500. But, yeah, I don't know. Okay. Feel free to keep the questions coming, but I do want to show you all some of the research that led to what I posted earlier today over on social media. So, we'll start with the winner matrix. What this is, I need to switch page views. My apologies. What this is looking at a champion's performance in the years leading up to their win. So you see, I haven't gathered Cam Smith. Granted, he's been on live, but I haven't grabbed Justin Thomas since his win in 2021. I'm just concerned with their form at that course leading into their win. So you see Scotty Scheffler. His first try at TPC Sawgrass was bad, miscut. Then a 55th, wasn't great. Win and a win. So 2023, his first win, he kind of broke a lot of the patterns that I'll show you. Cam Smith, 2022, win. He had a top 20 the year prior. Justin Thomas had a top 15 2 years prior. Rory, top 15 3 years prior. So what I ended up posting on social media, within 3 years of their win, with the exception of Scotty's first win, because he qualifies from last year because they had a win the year prior. I'm hoping that makes sense. Other than Scotty, the first time he won, every single one of these winners had a top 20 within 3 years of their win. So I highlighted their 3 years. Cam Smith, top 20. Justin Thomas, top 15. Roy, top 15. Top 20. Top 25 from Siwoo. Yeah. Top 20. Runner-up. Top 15 and top 20. Top 10. They've had recent success at TPC Sawgrass. Again, with the exception of Scheffler's win in 2023. So that's one of your first criteria when looking for an outright this week. Look for a top 20 in the past 3 years here at TPC Sawgrass. Just so you all know, this dotted line is when the players moved to its current spot on the schedule. So it used to be played in May. Sorry, I'm just fixing some columns there. It used to be played in May, or, a little bit earlier, depending on schedule. Then it got moved to its current spot on the schedule. That's what this dotted line is designating. Fleetwood was 27 2 years ago, 22nd 3 years ago. Does that count? I mean, in technicality, no, because I was looking for top 20s, but at least he's had something. It hasn't been like a 77th missed cut and a 40th, or a 66th missed cut. Like, he's had an amount of success. I will tell you, he is not one of the 8 players that fit all of the final criteria, but it's close. It's definitely close. All right, let's take a look at most recent performance. Look at these players. Scotty had won the Arnold Palmer, then comes and wins the Players. Scotty had top 5 the Arnold Palmer, then wins. This is Cam Smith. Top 35 of the Genesis isn't great, but he had still at least played semi-well. Top 15. Top 10, top 25, top 25. Almost all of these players, with the exception of 2015, and you can see how old this is, the Zurich used to be an individual tournament. 2015 was Ricky. He missed the cut at the Zurich, then comes and wins the Players. But their most recent start, they had at least had, I'm going to round and go to a top 30. If you want to exclude Cam Smith, it's a top 25. So most recent performance was solid. Look at their form coming in as well. Not just finish, But form, every single one of these players, literally every single one, gained on approach their last tournament. And since the players has moved to its spot in March, every single one of these champions also gained around the green their previous tournament. That's why we looked at just 2025 data for approaching around the green, because of the historical pattern of these previous winners. So extreme recent form is also really important. Makes sense since you need good ball striking. And then the last thing I want to show you, I'll zoom out on this. The last thing I want to, whoopsie, what did I just do? Oh, wrong button. Last thing I want to show you, let's take a look at form from the year, from the calendar year. Scotty, win, top 10, top 5, top 10, several high finishes. Scotty the year prior to that, top 5, top 15, win, top 15, top 10. Lots of form. Cam Smith's about the worst of these. He still won the Century. He still had a top 5 in that new calendar year. JT in 2021, top 15, top 15, top 5. Look at Rory's form. Rory's form with the year he won the Players. He hadn't finished outside the top 10 at all before he won the Players. Webb in 2018, top 5, top 10, top 5, top 5. Siwoo, quite a bit of an outlier, but he still had a top 25 the tournament prior. So every single one of these players, especially since the tournament moved to March 2019, every single one of these winners had at least a top 5 at some point in that calendar year, meaning the century forward. They had a top 5. So those were the criteria that I put forward out on social media. I had to, considering the 140 character limit, had to shorthand some of that. Hopefully it makes sense. There were 8 players. Siwoo Kim says, hold my beer. There were 8 players that fit all of the criteria that I just went through. I put those out on social media earlier today. So if you want to see those 8 players, I ask that you go give me a follow over at X. You'll be able to see them over there. Before I forget, I meant to do this in the intro. Completely forgot. I do have a shout out that I need to give. A big shout out. And this is just their username on YouTube. Joe Obama 1763 left a comment on last night's show saying that they hit the Carl Phillips outright at 80-1 at Puerto Rico. So congratulations, Joe, on your very successful and big hit last week for the first double tournament week of the year. And as always, if you have success, please let me know, whether it's in the comments of the show, reach out to me on social media, jump into chat. I would love to be able to shout out other members of the community who have lots of success, like Joe had with the outright, myself to a lesser extent with the very successful DFS that I had at Puerto Rico. Would love to be able to shout out more members. And hopefully we're going to do that this week for the Players' Championship. That's going to be it for the show. I want to thank Derek, Darnell, Justin, and Phil for jumping into chat. Very much appreciated. A quick note, or programming note, if you will. The DFS Tactics show on Wednesday is going to be changed in time. It's going to go. It's probably going to be around 6:30. Unfortunately, I have a scheduling conflict that I just cannot work around. So the DFS Tactics show will be quite a bit earlier than what is usual. So please set your notes, set your reminders. 6:30 Eastern will be the DFS Tactics show. It's just going to be a 1-week thing. I just have something Wednesday that I just simply can't work around. So make sure you set your notes and reminders for that. But thanks again to you four or five for jumping into chat. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. I love what I do, taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician and data analyst's view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Had a mildly successful week last week. We're going to try to build that momentum for the fifth major, the Players' Championship. Thanks again for all the support, for all of the wagers you have made so far this week for the Players' Championship, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Players' Championship. And until I see you 6:30 Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.